evening, everybody, and welcome to the U.S. election in the Middle East. This evening's event is sponsored by Clark University Students for Palestinian Rights and SpeakersForum. My name is David Ray, and I'll be moderating tonight's discussion. If you haven't already done so, please sign yourself into the Middle Eastern. Please enjoy some Middle Eastern food, which is in the back, but please keep your voices down if you're chatting back there over food. There's also still the sign-up sheet for Modern Middle East, and we'd ask that you can sign up afterwards, after the speeches are done, so that we're not disturbing it. The food in the back is provided by Bay State Bakery, so if you really like it, you can go back there and enjoy some more. So the two student groups that are bringing this event to you tonight are Clark University Students for Palestinian Rights and the SpeakersForum. I'm the treasurer of Clark University Students for Palestinian Rights. Our group was founded during the fall semester of 2007 in order to promote fair dialogue on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on Clark's campus and in the broader Worcester community. SpeakersForum is a student-run group that has been bringing entertaining and informative speakers to Clark University for over 25 years. We are here tonight to discuss two of the issues most pressing to many Americans today: the upcoming election and the dilemmas and crises in the Middle East. There are a few regions in the world as important to the United States as the Middle East, as evidenced in the billions of dollars spent annually in Iraq, the billions given annually to Israel and Egypt, and billions paid for Middle Eastern oil across the Gulf states. The United States and the Middle East are closely intertwined both financially and politically, and will most likely continue to be so for at least the immediate future. Tonight's forum will proceed in two parts. The first will be a presentation by the representatives, and the second part will be a short, well, hopefully not too short, question and answer part. We ask that you remain calm throughout the event, with particular focus on respect for both the presenters and the audience. We know that this topic can easily become heated, and thank you in advance for your courtesy and restraint. This having been said, let me introduce our representatives to you so that we may begin the event. First to speak tonight will be Bob Underwood. Bob Underwood is the candidate for the Libertarian Party of Massachusetts who is running for the United States Senate. He is a computer programmer from Springfield by profession. Following Mr. Underwood, we will have Mike Richardson. Mike is a freelance journalist representing the Nader Gonzalez campaign for president. How many of you guys came out and saw Nader last Saturday? Following Mike, we will have Chris Gonzalez. He will be representing the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Following Chris, we will have Bill McCarthy. Bill is representing the Republican State Committee, he is the Republican State Committee man from Massachusetts, representing the McCain camp. So can we have a hand of applause for all of our wonderful representatives?
Good evening. I'm Robert Underwood, the Libertarian candidate for United States Senate. And libertarians in general are non-interventionists. We shun warfare, the serious thing only to be done in defense. Now, libertarians typically are tolerant of religion and other things, and I suppose that would put us at odds with many cultures of the Middle East. For instance, in Saudi Arabia, you can wear a crucifix, obviously. We wouldn't care about any of that stuff. In Israel, religious Jews are complaining about don't really care what you have to eat either, as long as there's food on the table. We're also in favor of democracy. Well, most of the Middle East is really not that democratic. A lot of it's run by dictatorships. Even Israel, which is kind of a democracy, has its problems where they have special laws for Palestinians and so on. Obviously, we don't really support special laws for different ethnic groups and so on. Now, what would I do if I were in the Senate? Well, I would stop giving away money for one thing. We don't get anything for it. We don't get peace. We don't get anything. I also would not be in favor of trading American lives for the lives of other people. We wish everyone in the Middle East well. We hope they get along. But I already know a couple of people that have been killed in the wars in Iraq, and I'm not particularly anxious to add to the list that just contributes to the endless tit for tat that we see in the Middle East, and we've seen for almost generations. Now, American policy, I see one of the questions here is, why is the U.S. such a fervent supporter of Zionism? Simply because many Zionists have moved to the United States, and we have not really received that much immigration from other countries in the Middle East, maybe Lebanon, but by and large, the immigration has largely been more from Israel, Russia, and other countries that also contribute to Israeli immigration. The other thing is they're politically active. I myself am trying to run a campaign. I have to go begging for pennies from people. My opponents, Kerry and Beatty, will get lavish contributions, and they're not going to get it by knocking Israel around. But I myself really am for an American policy. What's best for the United States, and it may sound selfish, but in some ways we've earned it. Also, the rest of the world is living off of our handouts. When we go down the chute, they follow. I also would support, we need to get off the oil. The oil is what keeps us tied to our buddies, the Saudis, which funded a lot of the hijackers on 9/11.
Lost the mic.
Thank you. It keeps us involved in Iraq, and if we didn't need the oil, we wouldn't need them. So I'm all for developing alternative sources of energy. Our other problem is Americans really do not understand other countries. Most of us only speak English, and American-styled English at that. We are totally dependent on the intelligence services of other countries. And since 9/11, we are totally dependent really on the Israelis because they're the ones with the best intelligence service in the Middle East. Second to them probably are the British. But when Israel bombed Tunis, their pilots switched to using Arabic. They spoke it so well that the ground controllers thought they were Jordanians, so they just let them in. How many Americans could do that? None. We all but refuse to learn a second language. Now, the complications of 9/11 is, even people who don't like other countries in the Middle East, suddenly we need them, particularly the Israeli intelligence infiltrate a lot of the terrorist groups that we need to defend ourselves against. Now the other problem is, why do we keep sending money? Well, obviously, a lot of the groups from New York will fund separate West Bank. Thank you. So a settler can get, I think, $25,000 for settling on the West Bank. Some Christian groups are offering Christians a similar amount if they go into Palestine and try to Christianize it. So you have all these groups outside the area dumping money and creating problems. And the problems really started after World War II. As a result of the Holocaust, a lot of European Jews started looking for another country to move to, supposedly a safe one. And that's really what drove the immigration to Israel. But in a nutshell, my policy would be one of mostly non-intervention. I would use diplomacy. If we can bring peace in the area through diplomacy, education, so on, that's pretty good. That's relatively cheap. Doesn't cost anyone anything. But I'm totally against more military involvement. It'll be endless. The casualty list will be endless. The expenditures will be endless. It has been endless since the turn of the century, and it's probably not going to stop anytime soon. So in a nutshell, that would be my policy.
Thank you. Next we will have Mike Richardson for the Nader Gonzalez statement.
We've got a representative of the Republican Party here tonight, and they'll probably be telling us to stay the course and more of the same, and we'll wait to hear what he has to say. But we don't have a representative of the Democratic Party here tonight. We hear Mr. Obama talk a lot about change, but when it comes down to specifics, they're lacking. And they're lacking here tonight. I read the Boston Globe. I live in the Boston suburb and read the Boston Globe every day. And there's almost a daily picture of some Massachusetts volunteer that's gone off to Ohio or Pennsylvania, some swing state. They get a picture of them knocking on a door. Well, we can ship Democratic volunteers all over the United States to talk on doors. But can we get a single Democratic volunteer to come here tonight and talk to the students at Clark University about the Middle East? No. And I'm going to suggest that's not an accident. It's because Mr. Obama has really been dodging a lot of the issues and questions. And a vote for Obama is going to be really a vote for much of the same. Sure, the cast of characters will change a little, but the fundamental issues won't. Ralph Nader, of Lebanese descent, his parents immigrated to the United States from Lebanon, has studied the issue at great length and has talked with factions from all camps. And Ralph has come up with the notion that there will be no peace in the Middle East until we achieve what he calls a two-state solution. I'm older than most of you in the room, and I want you to know there's been war in the Middle East my whole life. It's in Lebanon, or it's in Iraq, it's in Israel, and even if it's not a declared war, it's bombings. You can't ride a bus in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem without worrying about getting blown up. It's an endless bloodbath, And peace cannot come to the Middle East by bullets and bombs. We've got to break this cycle of violence, and we have to respect the fact that there will be and needs to be a Palestinian state, and there is and it needs to be an Israeli state. Until there can be that coexistence, there will be no peace in that portion of the world. Now you ratchet it over a few clicks, and we're in a war zone in Iraq. In Iraq, you know, there was not a single terrorist. Once they did the World Trade Center and they were going to blow up the Capitol and attack the Pentagon, not a one of them was from Iraq. And yet we are in a war against terror in Iraq with no end in sight. John McCain says we might be there 100 years. Well, Ralph Nader says, no, we've got to be out, and the only way to get out is to get out. How do you get out, he was asked? Planes, buses, ships, that's how you get out. 6 months and out, that's what Ralph says. And if you don't have an arbitrary line, and the negotiations will be endless. The Iraqi government will never take over its responsibilities as long as we're there, and we're going to be there a while. We're building an embassy now. It's the largest U.S. embassy in the world. It's a city within itself. We're building dozens of military bases in Iraq. And what is it about Iraq? Well, it's the oil. You know, when we did the invasion into Iraq, we had paratroopers jumping in ahead of the troops to guard the oil heads. How am I doing on time?
You're doing good.
Okay. All right. But did we care anything about the people or the culture? No. Remember the Baghdad, the museum in Baghdad was looted? We just let the looting go on. The weapons everybody's fighting with. Where did they come from? We're the largest weapons supplier. We have been feeding this troubled part of the world for decades with American-made weapons. It's the U.S. military-industrial complex that has fed this inferno with the fuel to combat. Until the United States changes its foreign policy, there will be no peace in the Middle East. And the U.S. foreign policy, in case you weren't keeping track of it, it's real simple to explain. It's for the preservation of the disparity of wealth. The United States uses half of the world's resources. We're the greediest nation in the world for energy. When Henry Kissinger was in charge of the bombing, he called it geopolitics. The only Democratic president that I could think of that even tried to approach this matter from a human rights stand was Jimmy Carter. And in fact, he's even made some trips since he's left the presidency. And got the Camp David Accords going. But that's not what's going on these days. And that's not the message that Obama is going to bring. He talks about change. Nobody's here tonight to tell us what change really means. I remember the last time the United States used battleships, the big battleships, the World War II battleships. It was when we shelled the coast of Lebanon. 30 miles out, we had our battleships with those giant artillery shells shelling the shoreline. Well, who are they going to try to get? What terrorists are they going to try to get with those kind of weapons? Well, you shoot over the horizon with a massive thing. I was looking at the Nader website today just to make sure I was up on Ralph's position on things in the Middle East, and he was quoting in there, and it's on votenader.org. You can look it up yourself. He had a letter that he got from an Israeli military officer that wasn't going to do it anymore, and got court-martialed for his trouble. And what turned him around was he was a helicopter pilot and had been on all these missions to try to quell the violence in the Palestinian area. And one of the assignments was to get a terrorist leader. So an F-16 came in and dropped a 1-ton bomb house, a single dwelling, in a populated area. The pilot went and looked into that afterwards. The death toll were 13 and 160 wounded. I don't know if they got the terrorists they were trying to get or not. But that's been something that has been used now by the Israeli militarists for several years. Assassination of high-powered weapons into urban areas. And it's got to stop. The disregard for human life. They call civilian casualties collateral damage. It's intentional damage. When this Israeli pilot that wasn't going to do it anymore said, I will defend Israel, but I'm not going to overfly our borders and drop one-ton bombs on the houses in urban areas. The chief of the Israeli Air Force questioned this man and called him out on it. And he said, well, would you want me to drop a one-ton bomb in a house in Tel Aviv? And the answer he got back was, well, there's difference between Jewish blood and non-Jewish blood. This type of thinking has to come to an end. And it's a problem that's larger than the United States because it involves these other countries, but it's a problem that we have invested millions and billions of our treasury into creating and inflaming. So we do need some change, Mr. Obama. I wish you had a representative here tonight to tell us about that change. Thank you.
Next up, we will have Chris Gonzalez from the Party for Socialism and Liberation.
How you doing? So first, thank you all for having me. Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Chris Gonzalez. I'm a representative of the Party for Socialism and Liberation and the presidential campaign of Gloria Riva and Eugene Perrier. So with this opening statement, I want to try to address three things, and then I look forward to having a good and long discussion period after this. So first, I just want to go over who the PSL is, what we stand for, what is our election campaign about while we're running, and then finally, what is our position regarding U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, which is why we're all here today. So the PSL is a working class party that fights for socialism. Now, what does that really mean, working class party? As Marxists, as revolutionary Marxists, we first try to analyze the world around us in order to develop and follow through with a plan of action. So currently, we live in a political system that is dominated by the two major parties, the Democrats and Republicans, each of which are completely subservient to the needs and interests of the bosses of society, who are the banks and the corporations, the military firms, and the Pentagon. For example, the vast majority in this country are against the continued war and occupation of Iraq. The vast majority in this country vehemently oppose the grand theft bailout, the $1 trillion bailout that just happened a couple of weeks in the past. But yet, these things still happen. We still face these injustices and these obstacles. So we in the PSL believe that there's an alternative to this oppressive, exploitative, and brutal system of capitalism that we live in. The capitalist system, which is characterized by endless war, mass poverty, unemployment, mass imprisonment, racism, sexism, LGBT oppression, environmental destruction, police brutality, and so forth. The list goes on. History tells us that we don't have to live under such a system. The wealth of society should and could be in the hands of those who create it, instead of the hands of those who steal it. A socialist society is one where greed, domination, and exploitation are replaced with solidarity, friendship, and cooperation. Our rights as humans include and should include the right to a home, the right to a job, the right to an education, the right to health care, and most importantly, the right to be free from abuse and exploitation. And that is the essence of what socialism is, which is quite the contrary to what most of us hear in some of our classes or in the media, this dark, dreamy portrayal of what socialism is. But in order to combat this corrupt capitalist system which I just described, and begin the construction of a socialist society, Working people just don't need any old organization of their own, such as a union. But in fact, they need something more than that. They need a political party that can serve as the fighting machine that can wage a fight against the ruling parties and the capitalist class. This fighting machine helps to develop and spring into action the internalized discontent among working people. This internalized discontent that you find with everybody in this room, I'm sure, who's going to be facing loans to pay off after school, or going to be trying to find jobs after they finish school, struggling to pay rent. And so the PSL seeks to be in the front lines of the fight for each and every right and every issue facing working people. In this way, the PSL seeks to be a vehicle towards the realization of immediate reforms and absorb the experiences, both good and bad, of a mass movement. In this way, a party such as the PSL can be strengthened by its organic relationship with working people, and then is able to readily return the favor by strengthening its class position relative to the ruling class, the capitalists. While every progressive reform is hard fought and welcomed, in the end, however, it is the struggle for socialism that must be preeminent in all of our minds. We must be ready, therefore, to seize every opportunity and use every arena to raise consciousness and advance all aspects of the socialist struggle. So that means we have to be in high schools and colleges, we have to be in the ranks of the military, we have to be on the job, we have to be in the streets, all these areas. An important new addition to that list for the PSL is the electoral arena. And so, this particular electoral season, millions of people are glued to the TV, glued to the newspapers, and I think we can all agree that this particular election has drawn millions and millions of more people into the fold. So in one sense, this election offers up something new. The prospect of electing the first African-American president of the country, which was founded and built upon the racist enslavement of entire peoples, is without a doubt an electrifying prospect. On the other hand, however, neither candidate, neither party attempts to distance themselves from the characteristics and responsibilities bestowed to the position they're running for, the presidency. In fact, they're doing everything they can to embrace these principles and these characteristics. And so I'll go into more of these particular positions and characteristics for the Middle East towards the end. But just to come back to the relationship between the elections and a progressive mass movement, it is very important that we note that this current election is taking place amidst a severe global economic crisis of unheard of proportions. And with that understanding, it becomes clear that the ruling, the rich, the capitalist class in this country is losing its grip on society. It's losing its hold on power. And so every election is used as a tool of pacification by directing mass discontent towards the ballot box and away from organized struggle. And so as a result, we in the PSL feel that we need to be in these elections to expose them for what they really are, the corrupt sham system that they really are. And we need to expose all the big business candidates for who they are and what they represent. And so that is why the PSL's electoral campaign is one of struggle and not of personal ambition. Our candidates are not candidates in the traditional sense. Each of our candidates does not represent him or herself, but rather they represent the PSL and its collective beliefs. They are not professional politicians and are not merely seeking votes. Our candidates are proven and respected leaders in a wide variety of struggles, such as the anti-war movement, the struggle against racism, and they bring all this experience with them to their candidacy. They are students, workers, parents, veterans, and activists whose campaign is based upon messages of optimism, change, and real concrete grassroots struggle. Members like myself, when representing the campaign in a situation like this, are not just serving as spokespeople for particular candidates such as Gloria Louis or Eugene Purrier, but we are instead acting as representatives of a mass movement. And so with that said, the People Over Profits election campaign of the PSL is running the presidential slate, like I said, of Gloria Louis and Eugene Purrier. We're on the ballot in 12 states across the country. We're also running a total of 10 local candidates in an additional 3 states in Washington, D.C. And so this election campaign has undoubtedly reinforced our belief that the fight of independent parties for ballot access is an important fight to wage. There's immense struggle just for an independent party just to get on the ballot in the first place. There's very restrictive rules in which you have to collect a certain number of signatures in a particular period of time. There's fines to pay. There's all types of rules in which to perpetuate this domination of two parties in the political system. So just getting on the ballot is an important fight.
Excuse me. Just in the time considerations, keep it like 3 minutes or so.
And so, I hope that this, broad overview of what the PSL is and what our election campaign is about. And so, with that said, I'm going to try to move into our positions regarding the Middle East, U.S. policy in the Middle East. So the U.S. orientation towards the Middle East is that it is a vital geopolitical region, rich in natural resources, crucial to the main pillars of the U.S. empire. 70% of the known global oil reserves are in the Middle East. So despite its many forms, all U.S. policies towards the Middle East are imperialist in nature and seek to advance and secure the position of the U.S. capital in the region. Briefcases and trading agreements, while they are preferential, if they fail, the bombs and bullets will eventually follow. This policy of economic and military war does not benefit the U.S. working people one bit. We fight and die in these wars, we pay for these wars, but it is only the rich, the bankers, and the defense contractors that reap the benefit. Working people in the U.S. are the same as working people in Iraq, Palestine, Lebanon, Afghanistan, and so forth. For the last 6 years, the most prominent component of U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East has been the war in Iraq, and to a lesser degree, the war in Afghanistan. It is crucial for both the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to be analyzed within the context of the U.S.'s overall policy towards the region. The wars in Iraq and Afghanistan cannot be separated and stand alone on their own. The struggle of the Palestinian people, the sovereign rights of Iran, Lebanon, and Syria, the need to defend other Muslim states such as Somalia, Sudan, and Pakistan are all at the forefront of the PSL's positions. The U.S. ruling class has sought to rob the Middle East of its resources while simultaneously maintaining public regimes subservient to any and all of its needs. Any and all resistance to this doctrine of domination is therefore, any resistance to this doctrine is a threat to the status quo and must be instantaneously crushed. Historically, U.S. capitalism has done everything in its power to destroy mass movements and independent governments in the Middle East. The range of tactics include assassination, military coups, economic sanctions, area bombings, counterinsurgency, the use of paramilitaries and proxy forces, and outright invasion and occupations like we see with the war in Iraq today. And this is particularly true of any movement inspired by socialism and communism. As a result, Islamic organizations have filled this void within the resistance created by the downfall of any nationalist, secular, and communist organization-led movement. All these Islamic-inspired organizations, despite any differences that we may have with them, are nevertheless legitimate manifestations of the liberation movement due to their inherent resistance to the foreign domination and intervention. All the so-called terrorist organizations the United States talks about are actually those that are formed and funded by the U.S. For this reason, the U.S. has historically been and maintains the status of most consistent terrorist force in the region. Either through its own armed forces or through local proxy forces, the U.S. government has committed some of the most horrific war crimes in history. The targeting of civilians breaks all types of international law, yet the U.S. and its proxy force in Israel and other nations consistently target civilians and civilian infrastructure during aerial bombing campaigns and other military operations. The U.S. will use any government in the region, whether it be Israel or an Arab ally, as its puppet, as long as it serves at the beck and call of the U.S. imperialists. While it is true that there is a large and influential Zionist lobby in the U.S., led by organizations such as AIPAC, the U.S. would fund any country in that region to serve its ends. The notion that the Zionist lobby controls any semblance of U.S. foreign policy fails to recognize the relationship of power between the two. U.S. aid to Israel is a capitalist, non-partisan investment. Sure. And so with that said, the PSL, we stand for an immediate end to the occupation in Iraq, the payment of reparations to the Iraqi people, the removal of all foreign and U.S. military bases in the region, the destruction of the large U.S. embassy in Baghdad, the end of the occupation for the Palestinian people, the support of the right of return for the millions upon millions of Palestinian refugees who live throughout the region. So these are our positions, and And our campaign is, again, a product of a mass movement. The PSL is a member group of anti-war coalition called the Answer Coalition, Act Now, Stop War and Racism. Our campaign does not begin and end with this election. We know that it will only take, the real struggle in the streets and organized resistance among the people to end this war in Iraq. And so with that said, thank you for your time. Bill McCarthy for the Republicans representing the King and the
Thank you all for inviting me. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, I have to tell you that I grew up right over here on Wyman Street, so I'm a Main South guy, just so that you know. And I also came here to Clark. I graduated in 1993, so I am a Clarkie, and please don't hold that against me. As they had mentioned, I am here on behalf of the John McCain campaign, and when I spoke with the people from the McCain campaign and let them know that I was coming here to speak on their behalf, they told me to mention three things. They said, remind the people that John McCain has three main ideas when it comes to the Middle East: security, security, and security. He does not want any type of war, any more conflict than is already over there in the Middle East. He's very concerned about the security for all the people in the Middle East. I have a short prepared statement here. It's only about 3 sentences long on the Iraq War. I'll read that for you, and then I'll read for you what they also told me to say in regards to the energy. So the first one, in regards to the Iraq War. For years, John McCain opposed Donald Rumsfeld's failed Iraq strategy and led the charge for a change in direction. Now, under the new strategy McCain supported, America is winning and our troops will be able to come home faster and with the honor they have earned. As someone who has fought and sacrificed dearly for his country, John McCain understands better than anyone the cost of war and will never put our troops in harm's way without a plan for success. In regards to energy, John McCain knows that dependence on foreign oil is crippling our economy and putting our national security at risk. That's why he supports an all-the-above strategy to energy independence. He supports new drilling for domestic sources of oil and an aggressive pursuit for new alternative forms of energy so that we can transition to clean sources of energy for the long term. Some of his opponents only believe that we should not drill, and they don't believe in nuclear power, which will prolong our dependence on oil from countries who may want to hurt America. John McCain will do what it takes to get prices low and to keep America safe. And the last one is just to remind everybody, because I was at an event last week, and they kept mentioning George Bush, and they said, make sure you say this. John McCain is a maverick who has always been willing to do what's right, even when it means taking on his own party. He has opposed Bush on big issues like protecting the environment, campaign finance, reform, and the failed Rumsfeld strategy in Iraq. So if you could just remember that when you're asking me questions, because the last place where I was at, they mentioned George Bush 43 times, and I said, well, John McCain's not running against George Bush. So I'd appreciate it if we open this up to some questions, and I think we have some good speakers here who can answer some of your questions and give you some diverse answers. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Richard Kerford. I'm the chair of the Progressive Democrats of this district, Jim McGovern's district, which is Massachusetts 03. Barack Obama got challenged, and I felt that I would, in an impromptu manner, get up here and speak on his behalf, because his positions need to be presented. I think the most important points to remember about Barack Obama is he wants to turn America's intelligence apparatus back to reality. We've had 8 years of massive delusion on the part of what is going to work in our foreign policy in the world. This is a huge undertaking. As you know, American apparatus is rather significant. Second thing, Barack Obama wants to return to multilateralism from unilateralism. He's going to resort to the world's apparatus for dealing with war, which is the United Nations. Do people here realize that as of January 2009, America no longer has a UN mandate to remain in Iraq? How many people know that? Can I see hands? Thank you very much. There are some people who have some foreign policy experience here in this room. So whoever the president is going to be, they're going to be walking into that situation. We need someone with a level head, good judgment, and who has a capacity for diplomacy. Because these are the key assets that are going to be required in order to return the world to some sanity. Third thing to remember, energy. We are in Iraq, like we have been in the Mideast for the last 100 years, for one reason only. That's oil. We need to look at that history. So there is not going to be any end to war without America really dealing with its oil addiction and dealing with its energy policy. So here, I think that's important to remember is we have a world that is, number one, climate change is a real issue that needs to be dealt with. Number two, we are entering into a period of time where the world is peaking in its fossil fuel production capacity, peak oil. So Barack Obama is well aware of the twin issues and needing to deal with that. What does that mean? It means re-energizing and re-employing America. Re-energizing with green energy, it's energy efficiency, it means energy conservation, and it also means a vast new use of renewable energies in this country. We have here in Massachusetts, and Governor Deval Patrick, who helped launch Barack Obama's campaign, someone who understands this and who has here in Massachusetts launched a whole set of initiatives with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, with the Green Jobs Initiative, with the Green Communities Initiatives. These are major undertakings. What Barack Obama wants to do is employ the intelligence that is being already developed here in Massachusetts under significant leadership and turn that into a national policy. This is significant. All right, so green jobs are the way to employ America in dealing with our oil addiction for real. And yes, the last Democratic president that we had was Jimmy Carter. Forget Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton didn't really do too much in the way of true Democratic policy. But Jimmy Carter understood this issue back in the 70s and the 80s. And what we want to do is be able to deal with the world situation, energy policy for real. Fourth thing that needs to be remembered is why we are over there in the Mideast is because of AIPAC, which is the American-Israeli Political Action Committee. We send money over to Israel, which comes back to America through the back door and ends up in congressional hands in the most significant lobby in the United States. Unless we understand the flow of money in keeping us engaged in war in the Mideast, we're not going to be able to actually step back. Fifth thing, permanent military bases. We have them now in Iraq. We have permanent military bases throughout the world, more than 86 countries in the world. We need security. We cannot undermine our security, but our true security is our intelligence apparatus and our ability to be able to use diplomacy in the right context, which is the United Nations. So I think that I'm going to cut it there. And if there's anyone out there, who thinks that they can speak on behalf of Barack Obama and cover some other points, you're willing, on my part, to come up here to the microphone or ask any questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to take a seat up here and answer the questions as well, you're welcome to. So we can have all parties represented, which is fantastic. Thank you very much. We have another hand for all the representatives. Alright, so now we're going to have a quick, or not a quick, I keep on saying quick, I don't mean to, question and answer period. So if you have any questions, you can step up to the microphone up front. And if you could form a line a few feet back, so whoever is asking the questions can have space to ask and thrash around if they so desire. And Great. So if you have any questions, you can step forward. And I'll be repeating them because Bob Underwood has special hearing aids and I have a little mic here which you might serve in them as well.
This is a question for every candidate except for the Republican, because I know where you stand. I'm a Democrat. I'm a little bit concerned for the election happening on November 4th because every party, including the Nader campaign, Libertarian Party, and Socialist Party, will split the vote between Barack Obama and each of your respective parties. I'm very concerned about this because in the 2000 election, you probably remember, Ralph Nader was single-handedly, in my opinion, responsible for 8 years of George Bush because he wasn't on the ticket. Now, this is a reality and it's really, I think, very dangerous. So how do you respond to the notion that each of your parties will split the vote between Democrat Barack Obama and other individuals who will be in support of your same values and policies? Thank you.
One note before we get answers, if you could please leave the mic in the stand when you're asking questions. Thank you.
I think in large part that question was directed at me. At least there was a reference to Ralph Nader in the 2000 election. You know, there is the myth that Ralph Nader cost Al Gore the election. It's true that Gore and Bush were 537 votes apart. Ralph Nader got 90,000 votes. So I can see, looking at those numbers, how some Democrats can console themselves with the loss and blame it on Ralph Nader. But the reality is that Al Gore won the election. He won the election nationally by 500,000 votes. Don't trust me, look it up. George Bush stole the election. Don't blame Ralph. You know, it's such an arrogance of the two major parties that say anybody else is a spoiler or they will split our vote. Well, everybody in an election is a spoiler for everybody else. Guess what? Al Gore cost Ralph Nader the election. I mean, look at it any way you want to. And I'm not going to go past the time limit, but there is something more about that 2000 election and the voting machines that I'll talk with anybody afterwards. It's interesting.
We love Ralph Nader. He's done a wonder for America. And I'm glad he is still engaged in the political process as he is. My only response with respect to the question is Barack Obama as of right now, has a 10-point lead over John McCain in this election. From where I sit 1 week out from the election, there's no way that Barack Obama is going to lose this election. The only way that he will lose this election is if it is stolen for the third time. We hope that's not going to happen. I encourage everyone to go out to the website myfairelection.org. This is a grassroots effort to document on the ground what's happening at the polling place so that we can monitor in real time what's happening there. Let's keep this election fair and open.
I fall under what you might call, if this person of a vote stealer perhaps, but really, I think we all know who stole the votes in the last election, and it was not the small parties. And the small parties are only small because the media backs the large parties. I have to fight to get a little piece in the paper. My hometown paper, the Springfield Republican, listed the candidates for United States Senate, Kerry, Beatty, and that was it. It was only after I sent kind of an irate note to the reporter that the next day they mentioned me. If Kerry ties his shoes, it is news. If I talk about the free trade agreement, they ignore it, despite the fact that we have a 30% unemployment rate in Springfield. And as far as being a spoiler goes, if that's what it takes to change something, I'm willing to spoil quite a few things. Because there are a lot of people whose jobs have flown to India and so on. And if I can spoil that, I will.
I would say that the Party for Socialism and Liberation strongly supports the right of any person, any independent party to run. It is their inherent democratic right to run. I think the notion of a spoiler attacks that right. I think people should ask the question, when will ever be time, the right time, quote unquote, the right time for a third party to step up and try to break the domination of the two-party system? I think the fact that the Navy campaign has received so many votes in the past, and even to be considered a spoiler, is a testament to how bankrupt the system really is. The fact that so many people were so fed up with what was going on, they didn't want to vote for any of the candidates. They didn't want to vote for a lesser two. They wanted to vote for someone who actually shared their core beliefs. And so, I would 100% argue against that notion. Two, someone had mentioned that Nader is somehow responsible for the 8 years of Bush. That's sort of on the assumption that 8 years of Gore would have been all that better. With regard to the Middle East, Al Gore, was a primary architect of the sanctions campaign against Iraq, which killed over 1 million people, which starved them of necessary food and medicine. And so, that argument leads to the idea that UN sanctions that will cripple and destroy a country are somehow on a better, more acceptable level than outright invasion and occupation.
I'll speak to the next question.
Hi, my name is Ryan Foreman, and I was wondering, can you be pro-Palestinian and pro-Israeli at the same time?
Thank you, Ryan. Good question. I believe that you can, and I think that that's one of the things that you would see with John McCain. John McCain is the type of person who goes with both parties. If you do any research on John McCain, you'll see that he was on bills with Kennedy and Feingold. I mean, he is somebody that can go across the aisle, and I am certain that John McCain can work with both Palestinians and the Israelis. I mean, that really is where we are today. You have to work with both groups, and a lot of times people fail to see that. Oh, okay, if you're only one, you have to be against the other. But I don't see that at all, especially now in the world that we have after September 11th. You have to look at all the parties. My day job is a professor, and I focus on terrorism preparedness. And that's something that I've been studying, Middle Eastern studies, for about the last 10 years. So it is something that is very critical for the United States, for our security. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question, Ryan. I think that as far back in my memory as I can remember, there's always been a president that has been attempting to mediate between the Israelis and Palestinians. I think that the process of mediation is most important. There is a discipline in almost every major academic community called conflict resolution. Barack Obama is skilled in this. He wouldn't be the politician that he is if he didn't know how to mediate. I think the next president is going to have to step there. I think the question isn't so whether Americans can be pro-Palestinian or pro-Israel. It's whether the Palestinians can be pro-Israel and whether the Israelis can be pro-Palestinian. And bringing about that kind of consciousness would be a radical undertaking on the part of any president, and I believe that Barack Obama is going to be able to succeed in that particular mission.
It's a good question, but there's an inherent fundamental flaw to the question. It creates a dichotomy, Palestinian, Israeli, that doesn't really reflect the full dimension. It's a two-dimensional picture. There is no monolithic Israeli. We have the Israeli government and its military policy that's at the heart of the problem. And there's also a strong, vibrant, underreported Israeli peace movement. And that's where the focus of the United States should be, is working with the Israeli peace movement. Instead, they work with the militarists. And in fact, in 2004, Ralph Nader got in trouble with the Anti-Defamation League because he referred to the relationship between the Israeli militarists and the Sharon government as puppets, but as the puppeteer, and the U.S. were the puppets. And they railed against it until the sun went down.
Pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian, and most of my position is to be pro-American because the situation is rather hopeless over there. If we were to change our policy tomorrow, there is no assurance that we will have thankful Palestinians for it. We all remember the dancing in the streets that occurred after 9/11. And the harsh reality is, as I said, we are totally dependent on Israeli intelligence for our intelligence, we have little enough as it is. The Israelis see us as a big brother. We're the muscle. They get into trouble. We help them out militarily. And the problem is, now you have a person prone to a fight that now thinks he has a big brother to help him. The Palestinians also have a big brother, and to some extent the Saudis, they're bankrolling some of the trouble, but everyone is using everyone. But if we get sucked into this, we're just going to spend more money and lives, and it's time to be pro ourselves.
Pure and simple, it is a state for, quote-unquote, the international Jewish citizenship. Now, oftentimes being critical and taking a stance against the Israeli apartheid regime that exists in Palestine, you get, demonized as being anti-Semitic. So I think what maybe at the heart of your question is can people separate Jewish people, Israeli citizens from the Israeli government and the Israeli state? And of course you can separate that. People have been getting along for centuries. It is racist states such as Israel that teach and breed the hatred of Palestinians, the hatred of Islam. And so if you can eliminate that type of influence, that type of institutionalized racism, then you can start to talk about a one-state solution. A lot of people talk about two-state solutions, when there in fact is also a viable option for a one-state solution in which Palestinians and Israelis can live side by side cooperatively. There's no reason that can't happen. The impediment to that is the government of Israel, the government of the United States, who do not seek to ensure and to protect the rights of Palestinians as Palestinians. And therefore, the Palestinians have long waged a just struggle and resistance to that racist apartheid regime.
My name is Zayd Abdul, and I'm Palestinian. The American government the Israeli government is the biggest recipient of funds by the American government in the world. Like the funds going to Israel every year is more than the funds going to the whole African continent each year. These funds, they enrich the Israeli power to create actions that are against international laws, such as the apartheid law, such as settlements that are being built every day, which completely destroy the viable two-state solution. They destroy any possibility of a viable Palestinian state. As negotiations go on between Palestinians and Israelis, these settlements are being built, the walls being built, separating Palestinian cities from each other and separating people from their relatives, people from who they love. What I'm asking is, the American government has the power to stop this because it is one of the greatest governments that fund Israel. What do you think that should happen? Should America stop these funds that go to Israel and demolish the possibility of a Palestinian viable state? Or what are your stances on that? Thank you.
Excuse me before we answer this question, because my question was quite close to his. I'm Mahmoud from Palestine. I come from Gaza City. So, regarding my question is to the Republican Party. Regarding the three baselines, security, concerning the Middle East. My question is that, how do you think there could be any peace in the Middle East while there is money is being sent as well as weapons to Israel? Not every year, as you said, right? All the time, like a huge amount of money are being sent. Another question to the Democrat representative. Barack Obama, in one of his earliest speeches, mentioned that Jerusalem must be, or is going to be a capital of Israel. While he didn't say that it must be a capital of Palestine at the same time, and everybody knows that it has always been the capital of Palestine. Don't you think that this will make a bad reaction, or will be an assault against Palestinians at the same time that will not make any peace in that region? Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. I'm going to try to answer the question as I believe that Barack Obama would answer the question if he were here. I think that the first thing that he would say is this is a region, this is a part of the world where there is immense human suffering. America sends all kinds of money over into the region, including into Israel and Palestine. Much of that money is to alleviate suffering. It is through the vehicles where we give food aid and medical aid. There's another kind of aid, which is the long-term American position to try to mediate in that part of the world. I think that there is still hope there. I think Barack Obama brings a message of hope. He's definitely going to bring the message of reconciliation there and the message of peace. He's going to attempt to do that. I think you're right. The most audacious power that America has is its military. I think Barack Obama is going to want to retain that military, not as threat, but as defense. What does that mean in that region? It means a judicious use of power when it's required in order to bring the parties face to face with one another, in order to enter into the kind of process, political process, where the real reconciliation is possible. I think the last thing that I want to say is that Barack Obama is going to be stepping into the political situation in the Mideast, which now involves Syria, now involves Lebanon, now involves Pakistan, now involves South Ossetia in the Georgian region, now involves Afghanistan. Barack Obama has been clear in his policy that we need to re-emphasize what we're doing in Afghanistan, that this is the area where he wants to concentrate, at least initially, in order to bring about peace, because right now Afghanistan is certainly the hottest spot there. We also have a situation in Iran. I think the one thing that the United States must do, and Barack Obama is certainly sensitive to it, is we need to stop these raids across the border. We can't, just start bombing Syria and killing children over on the border, in Syria, and blowing up one more situation. We're doing the same thing in Pakistan. There has to be a pullback of America's military power and a projection of America's ability to mediate and bring peace. I think Barack Obama is going to do his level best to do that.
One of the problems of our volunteer Obama spokesman, and he's done a good job of carrying out that generalized change message and hope for the future and on and on and on. But I believe he's articulated something just now that's actually at odds with Mr. Obama's position. And that is this little foray into Syria and other adventurism there. Obama is playing that security card that you've heard talked about there. And I think this gentleman has advanced some notions that are a little more progressive than what are actually being advanced by Mr. Obama. But I want to get back to the questions about Palestine. Right now, the tragedy of it is Palestine resembles an Israeli prison camp, and that's got to change. One of the things that nobody's talked about, it's really the elephant in the room, and that's the fact that Israel is a nuclear power. We also have another nuclear power in the region, and that's Pakistan. And these two nuclear powers add a dimension of danger that has been underplayed significantly. At the time that we had the assassinations in Pakistan last year, and the country was in turmoil, large crowds in the streets, riots, curfews, martial law. There was genuine concern on the part of the U.S. military about the security of the weapons bunkers. And the U.S. had contingency plans to enter Pakistan to secure the nuclear weapons. Now, at least there, we acknowledge, and they acknowledge they've got nuclear weapons. Right now, everybody knows Israel has nuclear weapons, but it's never been officially acknowledged, not even by the United States government, never by the Israeli government. For decades now, it's the world's best-known secret that Israel has nuclear bombs. And why is that? Why have we not directly confronted the fact that Israel is a nuclear power? It's because of this unusual relationship between the United States and what many call our 51st state, the state of Israel. And so America tries to have it both ways. When it's convenient, we say, well, the Israeli problem, it's another country. And yet, when it's crunch time and we want our interests explored, suddenly Israel's our best ally and the bastion of democracy, even though it's not a very democratic state for even some of its citizens. And I think I used it right time.
Well, I'm a libertarian. I see we have questions for Republicans and Democrats. We call them Republicrats. And I can assure you that Israel would be on my lengthy list of countries for which I would flash for an aid in a heartbeat. The use ranges from militaristic expansion to just plain old-fashioned corruption. And it's costing American taxpayers money. And you can just look across the street and find better uses for most of that money. And well, we have Obama here. He wants the capital of Israel to be Jerusalem. Why is he saying that? He is saying that because in nearby Connecticut, when Ed Lamont, the anti-war candidate, won the Democratic nomination for Senate, Lieberman, supposedly a Democrat, but he was always a shadow Republican really, ran as a, quote, independent and won. So that put the anti-war faction of the Democratic Party in their place. It showed who was boss, and it showed which lobby runs the Democratic Party. And so Obama is going to keep right on saying that Jerusalem should be the capital of Israel and just about whatever else they want him to say. And it will end up costing money, and Americans are going to be coming home in coffins because of that policy.
Question? Okay. 1 minute response, is that what it is? Changing it to 1 minute instead of 10? Okay. All right, good. In order to answer your question, before I came tonight, I prepared over the last couple of days. I'd speak with a number of people, either from the McCain camp or a couple of my neighbors. One of my friends is he's president of the Greater Worcester Islamic Society, and we've had this discussion about Middle Eastern relations for probably the last 10 years as to how things can improve, how we can help all the people. Because, as everyone knows here, America is the greatest country in the world, and it's one of the richest countries, and we don't want to seek more turmoil. We want to seek out peace. Sometimes, in order to respond to different things that take place, the wars come about and conflict comes about. But I see with the new president, whoever it's going to be, hopefully it will be McCain, that he'll bring all the different people to the table, people from Palestine, he'll bring together the Muslims, the Jewish people. He has an ability to work with people. When he goes into a room to negotiate whatever it is, people know that he's serious because he has the gravitas. He has the seriousness where he'll go in and he'll resolve problems. He resolves problems between the Democrats and the Republicans on a regular basis. He has. And I think that somebody like John McCain, who's a serious person about a lot of these issues, he understands that he'll have people with him who will work to try and resolve some of these problems from both sides of the debate. And I see positive things coming from next Tuesday's election. I know that over the last 8 years there was a lot of conflict, people were divided, but I see some real change coming about, and I have great hope for that. And I think that over time, the different groups will build their political clout, and by building their political clout, then they can work better to negotiate some of the problems and issues that they have in regards to funding their people.
So a lot of people talk about peace in the Middle East, and that both the Democrats and Republicans talk about they're the better people to bring peace to the Middle East. But I think what they both have in common is their notion of what peace is. I think that goes to address the gentleman's questions regard to U.S. military aid to Israel. The peace that the Democrats, the Republicans, and the Israeli government is talking about is the type of peace in which Palestinians live in subhuman conditions, in which any type of resistance to the racist apartheid regime, in which we as U.S. citizens go into Israel have more rights than Palestinians do. I mean, that's a ridiculous notion just to think about. And it puts into perspective how deep the oppression goes of Palestinians. I mean, they're arrested in mass numbers, their water's cut off, and any type of military skirmish, the first things they attack are the bridges, the hospitals, the water purification systems, electricity. So the type of peace that the Democrats and Republicans are talking about is a peace in which there's a pacification of the resistance, a pacification of any type of popular resistance to the conditions that I just described. And so they try to do this by trying to build up Israel's military power so much that they can crush and that they can overwhelm any type of resistance. I mean, people seen pictures in which Palestinian children and people are throwing rocks at Israeli tanks. People talk about how, there's violence on both sides. They try to equate the situation. But Palestinian civilians are killed in disproportionate numbers to Israeli civilians. I mean, the amount of damage that the Palestinian resistance has done to Israel is negligible in the context of the utter destruction of the Palestinian people and the Palestinian land for the past 60 years. So the type of peace they're talking about is not the peace that we all think in our minds. The type of peace that they're talking about is a pacification of resistance. And I think with regards to Barack Obama's campaign and John McCain, I mean, Obama at one point, I'm going to give you a quote, at one point in the campaign, he said, "I've been proud to be part of a strong bipartisan consensus that has stood by Israel in the face of all threats. That is a commitment that both John McCain and I share, because the support for Israel in this country goes beyond the party." I think it's a really very telling statement of his, in which, regardless of political party affiliation, the goal of U.S. capitalism, which is represented by the Democrats and Republicans, is to have a force in the Middle East that can serve their interests. Israel thus far has been that force.
Hello, my name is Rachel. I've heard a few statements here tonight that have caught my attention, and some of those have been that Israel is an oppressive, racist regime, an apartheid regime that is responsible for destroying the possibility of a Palestinian state, either a one-state or two-state solution in that region. And I just want to look at a little bit of history. First, I don't have any questions, but I have some responses. And part of those responses include some history. If you look at 1947, the UN voted to create an Israeli and Palestinian state side by side. And Israel declared statehood in 1948. And the Palestinians in the region and 7 Arab states bordering, semi-bordering Israel, rejected the UN resolution, rejected international law, and attacked Israel, and ended up having to settle for even less land than they would have got originally. And so that was the first instance of Palestinians going against law and setting themselves back, in a sense. And so you fast forward a little bit, and you'll see that occurring again. There were in Camp David II, Bill Clinton, Yasser Arafat, and Barack settled, we're going to settle for an agreement to create a Palestinian state, and it was an opportunity that Arafat passed up to the detriment of the Palestinian people, I believe. And it was an opportunity that was equal to what Israel had when it was first created as a state. And so, in 2005, again, we're fast forwarding, Ariel Sharon said, look, enough is enough. We're not going to do anything multilaterally, we're going to do something unilaterally because this isn't working. And he wanted to pull out of Gaza and give the Palestinians their own area in Gaza, demographically. And what happened was a civil war broke out between Hamas and Fatah factions, and this opportunity to finally prove to the world that Palestinians can really make a viable political entity kind of came crashing down. And so tonight there's been a lot of talk of Israel this and Israel the problem for that, and Israel has destroyed this opportunity for the Palestinians to achieve political sovereignty and national self-determination. However, I think that in light of some of these events, you cannot place sole blame on Israel. A lot of it has to go to Palestinian leadership, to corruption, to misplacing funding, international funding, from the UN and from Saudi Arabia and other Arab states. And so what event are we at tonight? We're at U.S. policy in the Middle East. And so far, the countries that I've heard mentioned are Iraq, a little bit of Afghanistan, and Israel, and a little bit of Saudi Arabia. And there has been absolutely no mention of Iran, which is a huge figure currently, politically. No mention of Syria, of Lebanon, Hezbollah in Lebanon, or Egypt. And I think that is a little bit outrageous. Then you look up here and you see, take away the American flag, you'll see one Israeli flag representing one Jewish state and a whole lot more flags representing more Arab Muslim states. And to single out Israel as this entity that is responsible for, racism and oppression of Palestinians and just the problems for the world in terms of oil and capitalism and all these nice fun words that are thrown out there because that's what people like to talk about. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm not going to ask you any questions because I think I know your opinions and I think that they're uninformed. And I encourage everybody else here to just go home and look at the facts for themselves because there's a lot more information out there and you're not going to get it here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. You have a great historical perspective and a lot of passion. I'm going to encourage you to engage with the next administration in whatever way that you possibly can in order to see through your ideas for the Middle East. Certainly Iran is a very difficult situation. There's probably been too little mention here tonight. The last 8 years of American foreign policy under the Bush-Cheney administration has led to a situation in which Iran's power within the Middle East has increased significantly. They have continued to press forward on their press for nuclear power, and that is going to be a very, very touchy situation. I think Barack Obama's position with respect to Iran is the same with every other country in the area, which is fairness and talking and diplomacy as a starting point, and not using American guns in order to solve every single problem.
If we could just all keep all future questions as questions, that would be great, since we have these great representatives here who can respond to us. Thank you.
Well, I think that probably compared to the United States, Israel probably does have some form of apartheid or laws that apply to Palestinians, for instance, that do not apply to Jews. Even within the Jews in Israel, there are different subgroups depending on where they came from, whether they came from Russia or were born in Palestine. And I think that the problem is the warfare has gone on for quite a while. And if someone killed a member of my family, I'd probably want to get back at them. Then the history is such that, this guy has a history of conducting terrorism and guerrilla warfare, so I want him behind the wall because I don't trust him while I'm sleeping. And it doesn't really matter which side you're on. I think the feeling pretty much works the same. And as far as, some of us being ill-informed are, some surveys, Israeli surveys, shows that many of the Israelis themselves are ill-informed because they come from various linguistic groups that have immigrated. Now in the United States, of course, we have this fight over English only and Spanish signs. And in nearby Quebec, bilingualism is also a topic. And the Haaretz story I read watching one thing, and the people that were born in Palestine are watching another. Some people are speaking Hebrew, some are Russian, some Greek, etc. There's also been a large immigration from Argentina. Matter of fact, Israel does have a Spanish newspaper. So you have a lot of different subgroups. And if you can stop the shootings for a while, so after a generation it wears off, maybe you can do something from there, but I think there's a lot of bad blood, and it's going to be pretty hard to erase it.
So I just want to address one thing that the young lady said. She referred to UN resolutions and international law, citing the creation and the right of the Israeli state to exist, and that the Palestinian resistance to that since the beginning was somehow throwing away their chance, their opportunity for peaceful negotiations. And I want to just say what is a law? It was once legal for slavery to exist in this country. Was it wrong for the slaves to resist by picking up arms and fight against that unjust system? No, of course it was not wrong. So while people can cite all types of international law resolutions from respective countries that say the Israeli state is right to exist, there are just as many laws. There's parts of the UN that talk about is the right of groups to resist, to have armed resistance to this type of exploitation and oppression. So while there are laws that can be signed on one hand, there are certainly laws that can be signed on the other hand. And so we just have to think about what is a law, and a law is who makes it. If the person who makes the law is unjust and is wrong, then the law is wrong, and the law deserves to be fought. And the Palestinians have a right and a duty to fight against these laws.
I just wanted to actually quickly just address what you were saying. I have to agree with you in that it does have a lot to do with who makes the law, but then isn't it the right of Israel to resist the Palestinians saying we want the entire land, and that's what they want. They want the entirety of Israel to themselves, and there have been Jews living there for thousands of years, and there have been Arabs living there for thousands of years, and they have just as much claim to that land as the Arabs, and there's no reason not to have equal share. And actually, when the UN resolution was signed, Israel was in a security situation where they were basically split in half. There was a little piece of land that connected the two. So it was strategically unsafe, very bad, really, for Israel. And it actually almost proved to be the end in 1948. But getting back to what I really want to talk about, expanding what my friend over there said, ever since 1948, we've had wars in Israel, and a lot of them have, it's just been ridiculous. This is as much a legitimate country as any country in the world, and they're surrounded. You can see all these flags, minus the American flag, are all countries that surround Israel or in close proximity to Israel, and they're all, or a good portion of them, have been involved in attacking Israel at some point or another. And the question I heard earlier, there was something about Israel nukes. They don't, yes, obviously they don't say that they have nuclear weapons, but why aren't we talking about the reactor that Syria had? Why aren't we talking about the nuclear reactor that Iraq had? Why aren't we talking about what Iran is doing right now with nuclear technology? I mean, these countries are volatile. They have these weapons that could easily fall into the hands of terrorists. I mean, Iran, they are openly supporting terrorism, and therefore these weapons can easily end up in those hands. And it's dangerous not just for Israel, it's dangerous for the rest of the world, because once one person gets these nuclear technology, once a small group, things like dirty bombs can be made, etc. My question, though, for all of you, is if Israel is such an awful nation, why is it that it is one of
if not the only country in the world that allows for, first of all, they do give aid to Palestinians, but why are they the only country in the world that has a Supreme Court that allows for anybody, including Palestinians, as has been done before, why is it the only country that allows these people to challenge the state of Israel and win?
Just so that the Republican up here didn't say anything about how bad Israel was. I didn't say anything. I believe that we can have peace. So, and I know that John King will work for peace. That's what he's about. He has seen war from a personal standpoint. He was held as a POW. He doesn't want war. Believe me. What he would like to do is work for peace. I mean, he forgave the people in Vietnam, held him hostage, who held him as a prisoner. He understands that there are means for getting along, and who better to have as a leader for that. That's all that I was saying.
So, where do I begin to respond to that?
You only have 1 minute.
All right. So I'm unclear with you saying that Israel is the only country that allows for Palestinian rights and so forth. I mean, you referred to why isn't Israel allowed to exist? And I think that at the heart of that is a complete misconception that the Palestinians wish to wipe all Israelis off the map and completely expel them from their land. All they want to be able to do is return to their own land, which they were violently and unjustly expelled from. That is the root of the entire conflict. It will never be just. It will never be legitimate for Israel, for the Israeli government, for the Israeli armed forces to kick people out of their homes, bulldoze people's homes with people in it. Where's the legitimacy in that? Where's the so-called democracy in that? It will never ever be just and legitimate for a country to starve people, to systematically starve people, to dehydrate them, to not allow them access to water, food, electricity, and so forth, basic needs. It will never be right and legitimate for a country to wage an ethnic war, a racist war against a particular person, a particular group of people, the Palestinians. So that will never ever be legitimate, ever. And so as long as these conditions exist, the Palestinians will always have the right to resist, and resist with armed struggle, pure and simple. And that is something that the PSL will always firmly support. The right of the Palestinians to fight back, the right of return is a preeminent demand for the Palestinians. There's over 5 million Palestinian refugees living throughout the Middle East that are living in deplorable conditions in refugee camps across the Middle East. And so that will never ever be legitimate. So, I'm not sure exactly what you were trying to get at with saying that Israel is the only country in the region that allows for Palestinian rights.
Barack Obama is going to be the last person to demean the suffering of the Palestinians, which has been significant. Certainly, when you look at the Palestinian-Israeli situation, there have been agreements made and agreements broken repeatedly. We have to get to a context in which agreements are made, agreements are kept and enforced. The United Nations is the principal body that is going to be able to make and enforce agreements. Certainly Barack Obama is going to engage the world, including both of those states, through the United Nations and through a multilateral approach. In the last 8 years, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Palestine, Iraq have not sat down once at a single table in order to be able to press the peace. I think Barack Obama is going to want all the states. He's going to want a solution that fits the region as a whole, and everyone has to be engaged in that. That's a difficult process, and I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but I think that if we persist, it'll happen.
The last questioner asked a specific question about the Israeli Supreme Court, and the previous speaker was a speaker without a question, but combining the two together, let me just say, I understand that there's plenty of blame to go around, and it's no one actor in this tragedy that's unveiling on the world stage. And that includes our own country. We are part of that blame. And until we recognize that and we fess up to our role in the instability of this region, it's almost a lost cause over there, because so much of the problems over there have come from over here.
Well, the Muslims, a lot of them think everyone's terrible. They think we're terrible too, yet they flock to the United States for good old Yankee greenbacks. Bin Laden himself was educated by the infidels in Eton, a very upper-class British school. The problem is they want the tropics of industrialized society while finding fault with those who developed it. So they also really have a love-hate relationship with Israeli society. But the reality is, very often, countries that are colonized end up being ruled even worse after they achieve independence. When the British ruled India, how often did you see an Indian on the streets in the United States? Hardly at all. Now you see them all the time. Immigration from Ireland really increased after 1920, long after they achieved their independence. And I told one person, the worst day of British rule in the Sudan was better than what happens in Darfur now on a daily basis. And the Palestinians are also going to learn that things are not going to be so well after they get their own country either. And even the Israelis, without the massive American subsidies, how good would it really be? One interviewer with Harat said that there are no Zionists in Israel. They would all move to America if they could. And I think, when Marx said that religion is the opiate of the masses, the prime example of that is the Middle East. And they're going to have to learn to be positive or suffer the consequences.
Time for just one more question. Thank you all for coming.
My name is Jonathan. I am from Israel. I was born there and I was raised there. I've heard a lot of things, like my friends back there pointed out, about the injustice things that Israel is doing to Palestinians. There is a lot of truth to specific problems that have been occurring in that region. However, to make a huge judgment statement on a country with innocent people living there too is simply unfair. We need to look at this issue not as countries or areas of the world in conflict in general. We need to look at that, at who is causing these problems. And they're criminals. They're criminals, sure, on both sides. They're criminals all around the world. But the state of Israel is not a criminal state. I would like...
I believe Barack Obama would agree with the statement that you just made.
I have to wait for him to write out the questions. I'm the only libertarian candidate for Senate is largely deaf, so I'm reliant on his notes.
There's no real question, so there's no question.
There was no question, it was just a statement.
There was that question.
David, does that mean there's time for one more question?
Yeah, one more question. Josh, all right.
Hey everybody. My name is Josh Brzezinski. I was born here in the United States, but I lived overseas for a significant portion of my life. Actually, lived in Oman and been there for 4 years. I had a question. I'm going to diverge from talk about Israel and Palestine, and let's talk about our own country. I kind of wanted to know what everybody's views were on potential American government involvement in 9/11, and if you would just say something about that. I don't have any opinion on American involvement in 9/11 in America.
I have to take off my Barack Obama hat, and I'm going to have to put on my progressive Democrat hat. And I just want to be real clear that I think that the tragedy in around 9/11, and especially the 9/11 Commission's report, is bogus. And I think that there needs to be opened a new investigation under a new administration. And we need the full cast of witnesses to come before that commission and a new report to be written. And I hope it happens.
We should have confined our objective to get Bin Laden and his organization. That's it. No nation building, no interference. Just get Bin Laden and make him a missile magnet. However, had libertarians been in office, there never would have been a 9/11 because we would have harmed the flight crews, the hijackers would have been dead. We might have to do something to Saudi Arabia for backing them, but we would not have had this big clamor for warfare that we now have. So in a nutshell, that's my view.
I think that without a doubt there needs to be, a new investigation. I think the official story is obviously full of holes and blatant lies. But I think the most important thing that we can take from 9/11 is what it was used for, what the pretext that it created for the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, in the Middle East, and a new U.S. military drive for complete global domination through purely military means. I think that's the most important thing that we can take from 9/11, and understand the foundation in which the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were based upon were utterly false, and I think that should serve the real basis for popular resistance to U.S. foreign policies. And I would have wished that the group in the back had stayed. I just wanted to say that people always try to act as if they associate Israeli people with the Israeli government and say that Palestinians and Israelis are somehow, their existence together is incompatible. I think that's completely false, and people can live together. So I think throughout all of my criticisms of the Israeli regime, people are people, and I think that the Israeli people have a duty to resist against the unjust policies of their own government, just like we in this country must resist against the unjust policies of the U.S. government. And I think on that basis, Palestinians and Israelis can work quite well together.
Since I'll be the last speaker, I will keep it to 1 minute since it is 9 o'clock and I know the event was supposed to end at 9. In regards to the attacks, I'm very familiar with the model that these terrorists had used. They had attacked us in 1993. They attacked the World Trade Center the first time. They weren't successful. And Al-Qaeda 1.0 no longer exists. the majority of those people who attacked us either in 1993 or in 2001, they're either 95% of them are either dead or they're captured. Now we have to worry about Al-Qaeda 2.0 and 3.0. And one of the problems is that there are a number of people out there who have tried and planned to attack us. Osama bin Laden had said that he wanted to fly 12 airliners as they were flying from Hawaii to Los Angeles and crash them into the ocean. So there have been a number of ideas about utilizing airplanes as weapons in the past. And if you have any information about this, I mean, please tell the authorities so that, if there's something else that you think that's available, please let them know, because, I think that particular thing has been concluded. Now, if there is extra information, it's the same thing like with when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. They came out with their report and they found the bullet. One bullet went through 3 people. So, of course, we're thinking people, and that's why you're all here tonight. So we're always thinking about something and considering other options or other alternatives. So I want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you all for having us. I believe tonight was a very successful night and discussed some of the issues. Thank you.
Actually, I kept quiet so I get the last word. Our son Glenn answered questions about the 9/11 incident. Some of the scientific studies that have come out about the molecular atmospheric composition in the dust afterwards suggests incendiary devices, and some of the microscopic particles from the steel beams suggest a higher temperature than might be generated by unfocused fire, even using jet fuel. That being said, never has an event of this nature taken place, and with the elevator shafts and particular construction, it could well have been that environmental factors of the building generated higher temperatures than what they had anticipated that type of fire could generate. Did the government do a good enough job of investigating? Well, most people probably don't know. I haven't read the report. I know if it follows other reports that the government's done, it should certainly come into question, and made reference to the Warren Commission. We will never know who killed John F. Kennedy. Was Lee Harvey Oswald involved, or was he a patsy? Was he the sole assassin, or was he part of a team? Was it pro-Castro forces that did it, or anti-Castro forces that did it? These questions, unfortunately, are not going to be answered, and if it was a subterfuge that killed Kennedy, for example, we won't know, because that's the nature of secret government operations. Robert Kennedy. Sirhan Sirhan is in prison for his murder. We all saw Sirhan shoot at him on television. Sirhan emptied his gun at almost point-blank range. He was standing 6 feet in front of Robert Kennedy. Clearly, Sirhan tried to kill Robert Kennedy. But did Sirhan kill him? The autopsy says that Senator Kennedy was killed at point-blank range from behind. Take my word for it. Look into it. Check it out. The autopsy reports say he powder burns on his shoulder and the back of his head. That meant a muzzle that was like 3 to 4 inches away. And yet Sirhan was at least 6 feet in front. But did we ever get to the end of that? No. And so it goes on. In 1976, the Church Committee of the U.S. Senate investigated all of the abuses of the FBI under Operation COINTELPRO, J. Edgar Hoover's illegal war against American citizens and domestic organizations. Over 1,000 individuals and organizations were targeted with a lethal ferocity, and the Church Committee just scratched the surface of that and closed the book. There are people in prison today that were convicted under rigged trials from COINTELPRO days. So, did we learn the truth about 9/11? Maybe not. events keep rolling on, the news comes out every day, and there's some new crisis. So get involved. You have come here tonight, so you've demonstrated your interest, and you in particular have stayed to the very end. So I salute you all, and I hope I'm looking at some future leaders in this room right now.
So we'd like to thank you all for coming. We'd like to thank Clark University Students for Palestinian Rights for organizing this event, and SpeakersForum for funding it. And we'd like to thank our impromptu Democrat speaker, and Mike Richardson, and Bob Hollywood, and Bill McCarthy, and Chris Gonzalez.